Well, good morning, everybody. Just a quick update. The other day, I showed you my new website, theagweather.com. I don't like it. I'm sorry. It's driving me nuts. I thought it would be a great way to kind of start to do this, but it's not caching stuff correctly. It's actually messing up some of your browsers, and I don't like it. So I'm going to play around with a couple of different designs. I've worked on one yesterday, but I have to travel a bit at the end of this week for work, and when I get back, I'll get that new design iteration up there and running for you. So just want to let you know we're going to make some changes there. Okay, back to the current weather. This was yesterday. Just look out in the Pacific Northwest here, specifically Idaho, parts of Washington and Oregon. Look at the just widespread wildfire smoke here. We've had numerous fires, of course, across the western United States, and these new ones on the backside of this, fueled by some relatively stronger winds, are now kind of blowing out of the north through parts of Oregon, kind of redistributing the way the winds had been flowing in this area, therefore allowing the fires to spread quite a bit. This low is going to be pretty potent. It's going to continue over toward the Great Lakes. It's going to combine with the low coming way out of kind of the Canadian archipelago. That's going to come together over the Great Lakes by this weekend, dropping temperatures in a big way in the Midwest temporarily. We need to take a look at that. But before I get away from this image and talk more about that low and then the one along the Texas coastline, I do want you to see some of the other new fires here. One on the side of the Sierra Nevada, the eastern facing slopes, one down here in Southern California, just kind of on the rim of the Central Valley here on its western side. And you can see some of the smoke a bit farther to the east. In fact, as the sun is rising this morning, this is all kind of these little tendrils of smoke here from the western U.S. wildfires. Yesterday, though, just to kind of give you the bigger picture of what's going on, we have a boundary that's just hanging out over Florida and parts of the Gulf Coast, delivering some locally very, very heavy rainfall. Texas has had this surge of tropical moisture that continues to push into this area, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon, especially along the Gulf Coast going forward. That's added a lot of rain. Much of the rest of the country, though, hasn't seen much at all. And as I was looking at this satellite animation this morning, I did notice down here in Kansas, we have a couple of wildfires. I don't know if they're controlled here, but you can certainly see the smoke from those two fires in Kansas. And I bring that up because Kansas is one of the states that I am most concerned about over the next, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because of the precipitation pattern that's coming into that area. So let's talk a bit about precip here. The last 24 hours through 5 o'clock this morning, again, we have our low here. And that low is going to work its way eventually over to this side of the Great Lakes when it combines with a deeper low that's out of the Canadian archipelago. And that sucker is going to spin up right here, make the Northeast very wet going forward, but bring a lot of cool air in behind it. We're going to see more rainfall in the near term here, especially in this part of eastern Texas over to Louisiana, and a stalled out frontal boundary that's going to just live here on which tropical moisture is going to continue to feed. But again, that's your last 24 hours. They just kind of giving you a preview of what we're looking at over the next 7 to 10 days. If we just look at the last 7 days, though, I want to focus on that area in Texas. Because remember, for about, it's almost 4 weeks straight, it was a discussion about excessive heat in Texas and no rainfall. And now in the last 7 days, we have parts of, south central Texas. In fact, let's go have just a closer look at it here. We can just change this over to south central. You can see down here some of these rainfall totals are, in the 5, 6, 7, 8 range. Some places even higher than that. And so the swings in weather, especially this year in Texas, they've been massive. And I just wanted to show you those latest precipitation values. Percentage-wise, we're sitting somewhere between 500 and 800% of normal precipitation. That's what we're looking at in that area. What I'm most concerned about on this map, though, is that these areas that are in red are going to be growing in this area, especially right into this pocket here of Kansas and Oklahoma. There will be dryness throughout a larger region, but this is an area that I think is going to be kind of the epicenter of that really, really dry weather. Remember, when you're looking out in the west, this extremely wet weather we saw here was a couple of weeks ago. We saw two lows, right, that just came south to north right into this area, dumping a lot of rainfall along their way. But here's the risk we have going forward. Over the next 14 days, this is the newest European ensemble 14-day forecast. What we're going to have is a relatively deep low that's going to be offshore. We're going to have a low that starts here and moves east. In the meantime, a broader ridge with just weaker flow settles in, and we are taking most of the southern tip of the Bermuda High, its western side, and just pulling moisture in this direction. And there could be some tropical development here, but outside of that, the reason why I was so concerned about Kansas and Oklahoma, maybe Missouri, is this particular area is showing up, almost bone dry with no precipitation in the forecast in some of our models. So we're going to have a closer look at that. But as you see this, the big questions start to arise about this tropical. Are we going to have any sort of tropical development here? Because it's not just the European model. It's the GFS has a very similar forecast for the next 2 weeks. So into the tropics. National Hurricane Center, let's see if they've given an update to this. This was their 1:06 a.m. Yeah, they still haven't gotten an update yet. But 30%, 20 or 10%, 30. So again, this very suppressed mid-season, despite all of these signals toward a super active season, just continues. And we talked about it, kind of the miss that I had in the forecast, not understanding early in the year that despite the very hot ocean surfaces, the upper atmosphere was too warm as well. In other words, we're too stable in the upper atmosphere. But as you look at it here over the next 7 days, no major development, but take a look at this. This animation from the, I'm sorry, I got distracted here. I've been shopping for a zero-turn mower. Our mower is getting kind of old. I love it, but my son loves to mow lawns. He just mows like the whole neighborhood. He do it for free. He loves cutting grass. And so I'm going to surprise him at some point with a zero-turn. I don't think I can afford one of these, but I'm gonna look, see if I can get him something. So I'm just amazed that this website is advertising to me. Anyway, back to the forecast. This is what I'm watching right here. And there seems to be coming out of the Bay of Campeche or just off of Texas's coast, just tropical low pressure development. Nothing, I don't see anything major coming in this area, but there's development of low pressure. And as we look at it kind of broader picture here, I want to stitch this together with the story that I shared with my my colleague Matt Reardon. Now, I have not been shopping for any of this, so I don't know where that came from, but I want to show you just a concept that Matt and I discussed yesterday afternoon. Matt is an amazing young man and just brilliant scientist, and I'm fortunate I get to kind of rub shoulders with that guy and hear his thoughts on things. So Matt was making this comment about the pressure pattern that's developing here. Because as we play this forward through the next, this next week, you notice very, very low pressure here this is near Morocco. We're here in the Saharan desert, and it goes all the way up to the Iberian Peninsula. And during that time, the Bermuda High, it's got a little bit different position. You can see this low that's forming near Bermuda, but the Bermuda High seems to be extended here. And there's a whole lot of high pressure across the United States and eastern Canada. And the model continues to develop lower atmospheric pressure here and there. And that's unique. That's a very unique signal that we're looking at over the next, this goes beyond that. Just look at the high pressure centered here, where right over that area that I've been most concerned about getting dry. And we don't have any major tropical lows developing, but there still remains this region of lower pressure at times here that keeps coming back in the forecast models. So what's the point? Why tell you all of this? Well, Matt and I were kind of looking at what the impact of this is going to be. And there will be possibly in the desert, okay, so just a reminder, this area in through here is called the Sahel, a densely populated area between the desert and in the rainforest, okay? This is where we watch for these African easterly waves to end up becoming hurricanes that move like this. That's why we keep an eye on this. This is all monsoonally driven. So it's a thermally direct circulation. When we say monsoon, we're talking about a thermally direct circulation that sets up due to, so thermally direct temperature contrast. That's what I want you to think. It doesn't do this very often. And so there's going to be some big rain in the desert. And what I want to watch for is sometimes when this happens, you get these huge desert blooms. And we may start to see some pictures of that showing up. So I don't know, that could be very, very neat to keep an eye out on. But globally, while this pattern becomes established, like I just mentioned, this is a feature. Very wet France and parts of Western Europe, but still very dry Ukraine, Western Russia. We've seen for much of this summer wet conditions in Southeast Asia. We still have better chances of rain in pockets of Australia going forward as they approach kind of their spring time frame. We'll finish at the end with South America, which still does not have its monsoonal circulation in place. So we've not yet developed the right thermal contrast to drive a monsoon there. But overall, this is the bigger picture of how this works, at least in the models. And what it's consistent with is this. For the last about month, the MJO has left Africa, came across the Indian Ocean, and is now sitting here north of Australia. And what's interesting about that is, and Matt pointed this out, he goes, look, we're technically INSO neutral. We're pushing our way toward La Nina. But September is not a month that we historically look at and say that you have dominant El Nino or La Nina signals. It's not. Winter, yes. Spring, yes. Late summer, no. That's not, typically La Nina doesn't have a strong influence at that point. So we went with INSO neutral. MJO phase 5 in September does that. See that low? See the low here? And see the lower pressure that's kind of in this area with a high there. Now the Rossby wave train, that's what we call this, looks something like this. And that overall pattern, I think, might get just stuck for a bit. I think we might see it on repeat. In other words, get this pattern more often than not. And I'm going to build the rest of my forecast on that idea. And you all know this could change. But I think Matt kind of caught on to something yesterday. We had a good long discussion about this. So here we go. Upper level height pattern. As I play this forward, here's the low that was creating all the wind and the swirl that you saw in the west. It's going to give us some stronger winds later today in the upper Midwest and northern plains. But this is the low that came out of the Canadian archipelago that's going to combine with it right there over the eastern Great Lakes by Friday into Saturday. Now, when that low comes through behind it, okay, so for Saturday morning and Sunday morning, there's going to be some cold air that gets into this area, and we're going to talk about the potential for frost at that point. Models are not calling for it yet, but we need to have a discussion. Now, what happens after this? As we get into Sunday and Monday, this is what we got to watch. Deep lows off the coast. So big ridge opens back up in the mid part of the country, and that's going to bring in the warmth. But we keep seeing lows here off the west coast. At that point, the European artificial intelligence and the European operational and its ensemble are trying to continually develop low pressure here. Remember how we saw it was here to there, and it's way over by Africa. So this is out, September 13th, 14th, 15th. Look what happens. This keeps going back into that configuration. And several of the models are attempting to pull whatever this is in through the lower Mississippi River Valley. Now, that is critical to assess and understand because the artificial intelligence is the most aggressive at doing this. Other forecast models are keeping it much farther to the south. Now, why is this so important? You know how dry it's been in this area. And this is still, 12 days from now? If that does occur and we're able to pull that into this area, this would mean some considerable drought relief across this region. And I'm going to show you what these models look like out here in week 2 in just a few moments. But look where we land 12 days from now. This is the wave train that sets up low, low. So the flow is going to go over the top, and there's something sneaking in from the tropics. That something about this is really making a lot of sense to me. So let's get into it and kind of see the details. In the near term, we've got a frontal boundary that's going to sneak through the upper Midwest. I'll show you the precip on that. Expect some stronger winds out ahead of this. Nothing really cooking here in the tropics as we discussed, but we're going to watch right here off the coast for some low pressure to spin up and potentially soak the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana, and possibly a little bit farther to the east. And that is where we've got the flood watches this morning. Now, with that low leaving Idaho and Montana moving toward the Great Lakes over the next 3 days, major heat's going to build back into the west. We already have the excessive heat warnings, the heat advisories that are out in place, and you can even see some of the wind issues we're going to be talking about coming out of Montana with the early morning all hazards weather map. In terms of severe storms, we're going to keep an eye on the stormy weather in through this area today, but day 2 and day 3, there's just a general risk of thunderstorms across the country. I don't see anything that points toward major risk. So this was early this morning, just where the radar kind of landed early this morning, and I think it was a pretty good initialization on the model. So that is right about there. And as we play this forward, I want you to watch a couple of things here. See the front by tonight that's just sweeping. It stretches here from Wyoming all the way up into this part of Ontario. And that's going to be bringing in some scattered rain. It's not very well organized. There could be some storms in this, but it's just going to be, scattered rain across a broad sector here of the, starting all the way in the mountains and extending all the way to Ontario. Then as we play from Wednesday into Thursday morning, this is now Thursday around midday, Thursday evening, that front's going to sweep through the Midwest, and this low is going to sit here and curl up while another one takes shape just off the northeast coast. So we have one low here, second one there, and a third one down here. And it's that one down south I want to show you a little more detail about. Because as I play this forward, there's the potential for some extremely heavy rain along the Gulf Coast here as this system sets up. And maybe by the time we get out there to Thursday night, we could be seeing some better storms hitting critical areas like our Cotton Belt right in here in Panhandle of Texas. But overall, we're looking at some very, very heavy rainfall along the Gulf Coast. So I think a lot about Houston, for example. Remember, extremely wet spring. Then they got very dry. Then they had the derecho. Then they got bone dry again. And now we're back to a surge of tropical moisture potentially causing some flooding issues. And that kind of extends to a broader section of Texas here as well. So let's walk through this. Now, I will be doing this on the redesigned site. You will be able to see all of the model 7-day forecasts stacked up against one another. We'll have something that looks like this. I know a lot of you gave me some feedback that you really like this. But then you can click on them and see them individually. And here is the artificial intelligence 7-day. This is the NBM 7-day. This is the WPC 7-day. Notice how they're all in the same projections now. Here's the European model 7-day. And then the GFS. Now, I know I did those relatively quickly. You can right now go to the the live website, agweather.com. Just click on National Report. When you get there, just slide down and it's right there. You'll be able to see those maps. But what I'm curious about with this is just to see how this all takes shape. So this is looking at the high-res European model. So there's the front that clears through the Midwest, while the heavy rain kind of inundates the Gulf Coast all the way to Florida. The low curling up in the Northeast, very, very, I think it's going to produce some large wave action here just off the coast, could affect shipping. Now, as we get into this weekend, that's Friday into Saturday, watch the low curl up. There it is over the Great Lakes, just north of them. And like I showed you yesterday in the GFS, the European is now trying to put down a little bit of snow in this area on the backside of this. And that just tells you that with this high pressure here, we are going to be seeing some cooler air Saturday morning and again on Sunday morning around the backside of this. Now, possibly some storms pop up with the heat in the west in the mountains. That's what's going on here, while much colder air dips into the Midwest and to the east. But what do we notice? There's just this stalled out boundary here on which we're getting flow doing this. Now, you know that about 10 to 12 days from now, we have to be watching this area. You saw it in the, remember earlier we looked at the tropical stuff? Well, here it is. There's something going on down here that we just have to keep a close eye on. But outside of that, much of the rest of the country is not seeing much precipitation, which is why when you see this map, which shows you the next 10 days and the chance it's staying under a tenth of an inch, we have a huge area from the southern Canadian prairie all along our western plains, dipping all the way to the mid-south to the Appalachian Mountains, back through the Midwest, and back into the Canadian prairie. That's a large area east of the Rockies. It has a very low probability of rainfall. Where's the epicenter of the dryness? I think it's going to be right in through here. You do note that the southwest continues to be drier, and even though these lows keep parking themselves off the coast, we're not expecting a lot of rainfall in the northwest. Everywhere that's white is expected to be wetter. And I bet we got a new model run in here. Oh, we didn't. Good. So that's where the low curls up here, wet conditions, and then right along this area. Now, what's problematic for me with that forecast, just going back to who's going to be dry, is that you look at the last, several weeks and look at what's happened to the soil moisture. It's been depleted in a significant way in the eastern Corn Belt. Sections of the western Corn Belt, getting down into Kansas here as well. Very, very low soil moisture as of late, and we still have this here, but we expect this to be corrected. Now, because of all of that, I mentioned this yesterday, but the Mississippi is now 6 feet below low stage. That's about where it was a year ago right now. And if this September forecast I'm about to give you pans out, we'll likely be down here again on the Mississippi River, which is not good, 10 to 11 feet below low stage. So we look at it week 2 and you start to see the problem showing up. This is the CPC, the European model, the artificial intelligence, and the GFS. Do you notice how the CPC, the European ensemble, and the GFS all look the same? But have a close look at the artificial intelligence. That was the model that tracked this broader area of low pressure up the Mississippi. And I'll be honest with you, I don't get to choose which model is, going to be right, but this is the one that would be most beneficial to this area. Not back here. I don't have a single model bringing in moisture into that area right now. So from here, let's now just look out there at the other side of this equation, which is the temperature side, and we start off with the frost. What I'm concerned about is that the model is not picking up on the potential for being cold in Wisconsin, UP, Michigan, and parts of Minnesota. So if I could, I would just say that if you're in this area, kind of to the north of that line, Saturday morning and Sunday morning, just be very aware that we could drop those temperatures pretty cold. Here's Tuesday morning's lows. That was this morning. This is Thursday, Friday. Now watch. Saturday, massive heat wave up the west coast, 36 just north of kind of the Dells area here in Wisconsin. A lot of overnight lows in the 30s and 40s. We get into Sunday, that's a big push of overnight lows in the low 40s. But I'm just concerned about this area here, maybe seeing a frost event. Now, it's September 8th. That would not be that far away from the climatological normal of having a frost in a few of these spots. But after that, we do get moderation, and this is that colder air exits to the south and east. Take a look at the high temperatures. Here's today, tomorrow. Now you see the reason for all the heat advisories, excessive heat watches, and warnings in the west. Cool down south, all cloud cover driven, and rain by Friday. The front dips into the Midwest Friday. There it is, Saturday. We may be not getting out of the 60s, maybe 50s around the Great Lakes, possible for highs, while upper 90s in the Northwest. But as this moderates into the next week, there's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, we start to see the whole pattern opening up to trough, connected to a trough down here, and ridge in the middle. And that's why the day 5 through 10 forecasts, let's shrink that up, they look something like this. There's the European model day 5 through 10 and the GFS. And you'll note how hot some of the models are trying to predict the midsection of North America as that ridge sets up. So if you can avoid the frost the end of this week, we go back over mild for what will be the middle part of September and beyond. In fact, I just noticed this. The risk of hazardous high temperatures from the 11th through the 12th, we've now got a slight risk of heat, another heat wave here, again, following this weekend's cooler weather. All right, where are we going to finish this forecast video? I want to talk about La Nina. Since the beginning of August, I've showed you this several times, these trade winds got going. There is our kind of double-barreled Pacific high here. There's the Bermuda high, which we know is going to make a little bit of a northward retreat. Here's the wind still not making the turn to give us that nice monsoonal flow. It's still not doing that. We'll finish with that today. But it's these trade winds that have really caught my eye. And if we look at it here, sorry, I made a plot out of this. Here we go. We've noticed that over that time period, the sea surface temperatures have continued to drop. So during August, we've now seen a nice kind of progression toward La Nina. What else has happened in August is that June and July saw very weak rising motion here and suppression on either side, there and there. It's called the MJO. But now that we got into the month of August, we saw a reset on the MJO back to the Indian Ocean, and it's progressed here. And that makes a lot of sense. If we're going to get into a time period where La Nina begins to influence the pattern, what happens is the trade winds get going in this direction. They meet right here and give us a lot of rising motion. And we see that in the near-term forecast. Where's the best rising motion going? Well, by September 11th, it's going to sit right over phases 4 and 5. That's why I mentioned phase 4 and 5 at the beginning of this. The trade winds continue to have a stronger signal. So when I show you these maps, these Havmuller diagrams, if you see these blue-greens in the middle, that means stronger trade winds, and that's what La Nina type behavior is. So I tell you all of that to show you that we may get stuck here. A week from now, to just complete this narrative today, we have ridge, ridge, and ridge. And that may be something that we see happen more often than not, with only weak and short-term disruptions from having that be the jet stream pattern. So it's still very strong leaving Asia, but it seems to be getting blocked up into a pattern like this. Now I have to use the term block properly. It'd have to get stuck like this for at least 10 days for it to be considered a true block. But if we end up dipping low pressure here and low pressure there, and the wave pattern getting stuck like that, it makes sense when you start to see these longer range forecasts. So where is it dry? Under those ridges. Here. I'm so sorry. Go back to that. Here. Where are we wet? Well, across the south where the trough extends. We're wet off the northwest coast. We're cooler on the coasts, heat in the central part of the United States. That's not just what the CPC forecast. The European model sees it as well. This goes out to mid-October. Cooler off the coast, cooler in the northwest. Precipitation-wise, 30 days from September 15 to October 15, drier. Now, I don't know about the tropics developing a system. There's always room for that. This would be just the first month in the second half of the hurricane season is what we're capturing here. And this model cannot predict hurricanes. It's not designed to do that. But we're looking overall at a drier pattern. The CFSV2 sees it as well. If we look at the week 3, week 4, notice the dryness in the central United States overall, and come back to that temperature pattern. That's what it's got for week 3. That's the 18th to the 24th. Week 4 would be the 25th to the 1st. Very mild conditions is what it's forecasting. Only brief interludes of some cooler weather. So if that wave train gets stuck, that's what we end up getting. All right. Last couple things here. South America. The next 10 days, still very dry in central Brazil. No early monsoonal start here. Wet down in southern Brazil, especially Rio Grande do Sul, where there's been some flooding earlier this year. You can see that in the root zone soil moisture map. This has been extremely wet down here. Argentina, still concerned about the subsoil, the missing moisture in the subsoil. And Brazil is still waiting on the monsoon to arrive. Most of the models keep doing this, though. September, dry. Once we get into October, the models are all beginning to increase the rainfall. And this is a very La Nina look for October. You say, what? This. Wet here with a drier signal farther to the south. So that'll be what we'll watch. You've now seen me show you this for what? We've probably done this in the last 5 or 6 videos, that the European model continues to show a wetter trend in this area getting into the month of October, which could push planting very quickly. So I'm going to stop there. That was a lot today. I appreciate your time and attention. We'll just pick this up again tomorrow morning. I'll be in Iowa tomorrow, Bettendorf, Iowa. So y'all have a good one, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.